All right, we have some huge news with the Gen 3 Joola paddles, and that is they have officially been denied approval by USA Pickleball for the second time now, which means Joola and all their Gen 3 paddles are pretty much screwed at this point. And while it's not mentioned that these paddles are officially banned now, I think it's safe to say that these paddles are officially banned now. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's just jump straight into things. For starters, just as a quick refresher, on May 16th, USA Pickleball made an announcement stating that the Gen 3 Joola paddles were officially removed from the approved paddle list due to failing the paddle tests, and on that same day, Joola made a response saying, oh wait, this was actually just a simple mistake. We accidentally sent in the wrong paddles to be reviewed. They specifically said that the Joola Gen 3 paddles on the market are materially the same as the models approved by USAP in the September 2023 paddle submission process, and we are confident that they are fully compliant with the USAP standards. And oh boy, did that not age well, because on June 4th, USA Pickleball made their nail in the coffin statement by saying this. USA Pickleball received and tested newly submitted paddles which did not meet our approved equipment standards. As a result, these paddles have not been added to the USA Pickleball approved equipment list. This has slowly become one of the biggest shit shows with paddles we have ever seen. And that's without even bringing up the core crushing issues that these things were having, which ironically doesn't even seem like a big deal anymore. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and so do I, but there's only so much information we know at this time, but let's go over what we do know right now. For starters, why were the Joola Gen 3s approved in the first place? Well, to put it simply, Joola basically sent in completely different paddles than the ones they actually launched with. All we know right now is that Joola claimed that the paddles that were originally approved were pretty much identical to the ones they launched, and that clearly wasn't the case. Twice. The real concern here is that it's starting to look like Joola intentionally sent in different paddles just so they could get it approved and then pushed completely different ones out on the market so that they'd sell better. And it's actually speculated that Joola isn't the only one doing this, and that there's a lot of other big paddle companies out there doing this as well. USAP even stated that one of the ways they manage compliance of a paddle after it's been launched is to discreetly acquire samples and test them in an independent lab, which seems to be what happened here with the Gen 3s. Now, another big question I'm sure everyone here is wondering is why were the Gen 3s denied at all? That unfortunately is information we don't have yet, but there are some theories floating around. One was that the propulsion core itself had too many moving parts inside, and another was assuming that they just failed their power and spin tests, which is probably the more believable one. Still, if that's the case, that also begs the question, why are Gen 3s getting banned and not other equally as powerful paddles like the Gearbox Pro? And to that, some were saying that maybe it's because the Gearbox doesn't use compressible foam, and others were just saying it's possible the Gearbox just takes a bit more time to warm up. But while it might pass initially, after a month of playing with one, the Gearbox probably wouldn't pass later. But again, that's just a very stretched out theory. There's probably a much better explanation there. It's also possible that the Gen 3s failed USAP's newest test that was just recently announced to the paddles manufacturers called the exit velocity test, where they essentially shoot a 60-mile-an-hour holeless ball onto the paddles and measure the exit velocity from the rebound. Which, if that is the case, that could actually mean Joola could be telling the truth about the identical paddles for testing and it actually being USAP's tests that have actually changed, but it is pretty unlikely. There's no evidence that USAP is even using these tests yet, and if they are, if there's an official cutoff for when they'll even start using it. However, it's actually rumored that a wave of other paddles will be joining the Gen 3 Joola soon on the unapproved list due to the result of this exit velocity test, so things could get even more interesting real soon. Now, is there a chance that the Gen 3 paddles could still be approved? I mean, sure, it's a possibility, but at this point, I'd say, yeah, probably not. I mean, the first go around, sure, it's a little weird that Joola would send in the wrong paddles, but it's something that could and has actually happened in the past with other companies like CRBN. In 2022, they allegedly sent in a bad batch that was denied, but later successfully got retested and reapproved. However, since Joola's second attempt just failed, trying to convince USAP that they sent in a bad batch or the wrong paddles twice probably isn't going to happen. USAP states that they'll communicate directly with the manufacturer, aka Joola, to address the issues, but if it wasn't actually an error in sending in the wrong paddles for approval, it's probably the actual paddles themselves, and it's not like you can just change all the paddles already out there, even if it is just a simple fix. And let's say even if Joola is somehow able to get all of their Gen 3 paddles approved, honestly, I think the damage is kind of already done with the Gen 3s. People are already kind of over all this drama on whether or not they can use their almost $300 paddle, so I think it's going to take a lot of time for them to start rebuilding that trust with their customers. In light of all this, and to no surprise, most people will probably be trying to return their paddle too, which is a whole different issue as well. Joola isn't exactly known for their customer service on a good day, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with this situation. I will say that they have been been providing refunds at the cost of you paying shipping and dealing with their customer service, but they haven't exactly been public about that information, probably because they just don't want you to return it. Additionally, this could easily turn into an even bigger deal to the point where I could even see people filing class action lawsuits versus Joola. Because while people who purchased their Gen 3 paddle through Joola could get refunds directly through Joola, what about all the people who got one through their club or ambassador or whoever? Who refunds them? Is it Joola? Is it the club? I mean, this whole situation is just about to get so messy. Anyway, so what does this mean for the future of Gen 3 paddles? Well, at this point, I think it essentially means that there really isn't one for them anymore, at least in the competitive space. Even before the recent announcement, some tournaments had already begun banning the Gen 3s, and now with the recent news, there's probably no chance you're ever going to get to legally play with one again. Now with that said, I'm sure a lot of the casual tournaments will still allow them, and this won't directly affect most players, as most people using these are most likely rec players. But that also begs the question, are paddles like this still even worth it in rec play? I mean, sure, if you like the paddle and are having fun with it, go for it. You didn't spend hundreds of dollars not to use it. But like I said earlier, even overlooking all this drama, there's still some other issues like the core crushing problem, or people just not being happy when playing against the Gen 3s. These paddles really have gotten such a bad rep because of how powerful they are, that people really have started looking down on them even in rec play. And now with the recent news, that issue probably isn't going to get much better. It really does start bringing the question into light though on if these kind of paddles are too powerful and if they should even exist in the game, period. I mean, personally, at the rec level, you could use a Gen 4 propulsion core frying pan and I wouldn't really care, but I know there are people out there who would. Nevertheless, all we can really do now is wait for Joola's response to see what happens next. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.